Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the fourth episode of Over the Net. We have all our usual hosts here today. I will start with myself. My name is Dylan Heinrich. I am one of the volleyball beat writers here for Rock M. I also do softball and women's basketball coverage, so we are well into the thick of it on women's basketball. We're going to talk about some of the SEC play thus far with my two co-hosts, starting with Colin Simmons.
I'm Colin, everyone. I was here on the first episode, missed the last one, but I'm back now. And I also cover soccer exclusively at Rock M. Not exclusively, but I've been helping out Dylan here and there with volleyball, looking to get more into it as the SEC stretch continues.
And hey, everybody, my name is Matthew Gustafson. I am one of the current football and men's basketball beat writers at Rock M and was formerly the volleyball beat writer as well.
Perfect. Before we get started, I also have a note from Karen Steger, who is our editor, but is currently drowning in grading and apologizes not being here. Admit this right. Ahem. Dear Over the Net listeners, I would like to call your attention to the fact that our esteemed former volleyball writer, Matthew Gustafson, left the Missouri Tigers out of his top 25 on his KCOU show, Service to 7. For shame, Matthew! Boo! Boo! Thank you, and I hopefully will see you soon with all sorts of Mizzou news. So, it is a shame that we cannot get Karen on this episode, but she obviously is referencing Matthew's top 25, which he left Mizzou out. They are currently ranked number 25 in the AVCA polls. We'll start with you, Matthew. What have you seen over these past couple weeks that finally dropped the Tigers out?
Well, simply a lack of wins. They have done about as expected against top competition, but when you add in losses to Arkansas State as well as the most recent loss to Oklahoma, two teams that Mizzou is more talented than, you're looking at a team that is currently 9-6 and I believe has one power conference win. As talented as Mizzou is, and I still believe that they're one of the best teams talent-wise in the country, that they can still be a top 25 team and will be in my top 25 again. 9-6 with one power conference win isn't top 25 worthy. And that's a simple fact. When you look at some of the other teams that I ranked ahead of them, a combination of a better record than the Tigers and higher quality wins. For example, Illinois, who has a better record or similar record to Mizzou, but has those big wins. To me, looking at resume, that's going to get you a higher ranking. I would say that currently Illinois is more deserving of a top 25 spot than Mizzou. Does that mean that Illinois is a better team? No, I don't believe they are. I think Mizzou is the better team, and I think that they'll end the year ranked higher than Illinois is. But at this moment, I simply don't think that it would be reasonable to say that Mizzou is a top 25 team, that there are not 25 teams more deserving of a top 25 ranking than Mizzou.
Colin, we'll switch over to you. Obviously, Matthew doesn't have them ranked, but the AVCA still has them number 25, which is a lot of goodwill that they've built. What is your kind of reaction in the way that they're still viewed in the eyes of the volleyball world, despite kind of this slow start to the year?
Yeah, I think that kind of just goes to show how tough the schedule has been for Mizzou to start out the SEC. Like, yes, I think the errors have been very frustrating at times, and the inability to stop runs and just let them pile up has been kind of awful to see. And then, I think starting with Kaylin on offense, she started to step up, but being more of an efficient leader is really going to change this offense, in my opinion. But I think just still being ranked in the top 25, that kind of does show a little bit of respect for Don Sullivan, in my opinion, and the pedigree that this program has put on in the past couple of years. I like that they're still ranked. I think they deserve to be ranked. And I think especially with the stretch upcoming, I think they can prove that they deserve to be in that top 25.
Yeah, I think a lot of it, again, like you said, comes down to quality number of wins. And so there's no doubt the schedule has been tough. We'll take a look at these last 2 weeks, and we'll start with the toughest part, the double Texas road trip. You lose to A&M in 4 sets. You are swept by Texas. We'll start with you, Colin. What did you see from that weekend and those two losses to two top 10 teams from Missouri?
Well, despite the sweep to Texas, I think that match actually looked just much better than A&M, just from a consistency standpoint, because they got better with each set and kept each set at least close. Meanwhile, Texas A&M was just all over the place. I mean, you win that third set just in a tight one to give you some hope, and then it's just a fall off performance in that fourth set. And I think that goes to show just the inconsistencies of the team. Like, there was that good fight in the fourth set or the third set, but you let them go on a 9-point run and a 6-point run against A&M in that fourth set. That just can't happen. Their worst hitting percentage was also against A&M, and 30 attacking errors. That's just not going to lead to success. I think against Texas, that was about the best 3-0 loss you could see. That actually gave me some hope for the future after that match, because the team looked better with each set, and they only had 16 total errors for that match. Texas was just clearly the more talented team, just more efficient. I thought Kaylin and Reagan both looked really solid in that Texas stretch, but Janet and Tyra kind of struggled to be those supporting cast members, and against teams like A&M and Texas, you kind of need all four of them to be at their best to compete.
And I mean, Texas right now, in my top 25 poll, since we brought it up, I mean, I've got them number one. I have for consecutive weeks. There is no better team in the country right now than the Texas Longhorns, and to go to Austin, to go toe-to-toe with them for 2 of 3 sets, a team that until a couple of days ago had a 5-6 or so match streak where they did not give up a set. One single set against a power conference opponent, I think was pretty impressive. And I think it also showed that offense is not the main issue right now for this team. It was a major struggle against Texas A&M, but you saw a different Mizzou offense against the Longhorns, and a lot of that was because of Kaylin Alexander. Alexander was easily the best player in that match, the most productive player in that match for Mizzou with 17 kills, had a very impressive hitting percentage in that match as well. As I look for that exact number, 385. 17 kills on a 385 hitting percentage is incredibly difficult to do. But as good as hitting 250 is against the Texas team, it's not going to get it done when you're allowing them to hit 313. The errors were much more limited. That's something that is going to be the key for this offense, is when they are most effective. And I mean, it's just common sense. You're going to have less errors. So it's about limiting those self-made mistakes. And right now, when you can do that, when Alexander is efficient, and she has looked significantly better since the last time that we talked, we're talking about a completely different Mizzou offense. And we're talking about the Mizzou offense that we expected to see at the beginning of this season. That being said, the defense is still lagging behind. The defense and the serve receive, the major issues that led to that upset, that reverse sweep by Oklahoma.
Yeah, we'll go ahead and touch on that Oklahoma match here in a little bit, but just staying with the Texas theme as well. Like you said, Colin, I feel that even though they were swept by Texas, that was the better match for the team. They were constantly competitive against a team that is, frankly, just a little bit better than A&M right now, just a smidge. They were competitive in every set. You could see in that A&M set, by the time it got to the fourth, they kind of given up, which was weird considering they had won the third set, but they played a lot better against A&M. The block looked really good. Makalo Baglio, the true freshman, has gotten some good minutes at the right side. Still trying to find her groove offensively, but from a blocking standpoint, been very good. Reagan Haith as well has been very effective at the nets. So the Mizzou block isn't world-beating, but it's definitely better than when we talked about the first couple weeks. Before we get to the Oklahoma match, Mizzou gets its first SEC win of the year, frankly, in pretty dominating fashion over Arkansas. They won that first set. I don't have it on top of me. I think it was 25-15, 25-16, but at one point they were up by 15 points in that set. Colin, What can you take away from that Arkansas win and just the talent this team has?
Yeah, as you said, they just really took care of business. They did exactly what they needed to. They set the tone from that first frame, going on a 7-point run, and then it was close to a 10-point run on separate occasions to set the tone of that first set. And they limited their own errors, which has been a big problem this season. And they didn't let Arkansas go on runs of their own, which was huge. The defense was insane. Best I've seen in a while. 46 digs and 14 blocks. Meanwhile, Arkansas only had 1 block for the match. And I think that just shows that the Mizzou attackers did a better job of pinpointing their attacks than they may have had been on a tough Texas stretch. And in my opinion, that looked like Kalen's best match. Although it might have not been against the same competition as those Texas teams, she put up over 15 kills, hitting 500, and then Tyre was great at the net as well, 9 kills and 7 blocks. So I think you just see Missouri's best players stepping up when you need them to.
I think that this last week, you saw sort of the dichotomy of what this team can be. You saw what it can be at its best, and you saw what it can be at its worst. You saw it nearly at its best against Arkansas, a team that was dominant. The Tigers dominant offensively, had 4 players who had 6 or more kills. Kalen Alexander, 16 kills, hitting 500, a dominant block. They were blocking everything that Arkansas was sending over that net. Zoe Evans, one of the best offensive middles in the SEC, they shut her down. She was a non-factor in that match, and that's because of how the Tigers were performing offensively. They were in system. They had multiple hitters who were options for Marina Crownover, and they were getting Arkansas out of system. They were really struggling, Arkansas was, to deal with the serving from Mizzou. On the other side, Mizzou serve-receive was very, very good. That is what this team can be. That is the team that we thought they would be entering the preseason, what they can still be. But you also see the lingering issues that could drag this team down from reaching its full potential against Oklahoma. You win the first 2 sets, and this was very, very reminiscent of that Texas A&M match on the road last season, and then just a completely different looking team. You hit 200, 160 in the third and fourth sets, but really the difference, the offense for Oklahoma. Mizzou could not stop the Sooners, and they could not stop Oklahoma from siding out. You need to stop a team from siding out in order to go on a run. That's something Mizzou couldn't do in this match. Oklahoma in 3, 4, and 5 hit 433 and 500 in both the fourth and final 5th sets. You're not going to win when you're letting the other team hit 500 over the course of a set. It's simply not going to happen. Oklahoma dominant offensively. Mizzou did not have an answer. And offensively, the struggles to me really came down to serve receive. They were consistently, Oklahoma was getting Mizzou out of system with nearly every single serve. You had only 1, maybe 2 hitters who were an option for Marina Crownover. And when you limit an offense to 1 option, the blocking's going to know where the ball is going, and you're going to see the blocks that Oklahoma was able to get. You're going to see the struggles that Mizzou had because you had poor serve receive and you did not have multiple options for your setter offensively.
Colin, do you have anything to add about the Oklahoma match?
A little bit. I won't go into huge detail since Matthew covered a lot there. But just like the big momentum shifter of that match in my mind was in the second set when Oklahoma went on that 7-point run when it was 23-13 to make it 23-20. That kind of felt like a telltale sign that they were starting to figure it out. And from there, Mizzou just kind of struggled, especially the back row, struggled to adjust to Oklahoma's adjustments. And that was kind of the downfall, at least in my mind, from that match.
Yeah, I got a chance to talk to Coach after that match, and she very much said that is, of course, volleyball, like any sport, is a game of adjustments. It's a game of change. Mizzou threw that big first punch. They won that first set. They went up big in the second set. But you could see later in that second set, Oklahoma was starting to figure it out. They were able to identify what Mizzou was doing with Kalen Alexander, and they kind of shut that down. And then Mizzou never quite punched back. You feel that this team in the past has been able to adjust, to look to your middles, to look to your back row, but they can never quite find themselves in system enough or make that change individually. So they just never really line it up. And as a result, the Oklahoma offense was just teeing off at certain points, just easy kills left and right. And you could see Mizzou was overwhelmed at points, especially in that fifth set. They tried to make a late rally, but at one point I think they were down 8 points in that final set. It might have been more. It was a real stretch for the Tigers. And so, like Coach said, is you got to be able to meet them at that level. When your opponents are able to heighten it up a level, what does Mizzou do next? Hopefully we can see some more of that in this weekend's games. On the road, once again, Florida and Auburn. Both these teams middle of the pack in the SEC, which is kind of surprising because Auburn was 4-12 in the SEC last year. Florida, I believe, was the number 3 or 4 team in the conference. Very talented, but both kind of meeting in the middle as Auburn's on the rise, Florida's on the fall. What were you able to scout a little bit in this matchup, Colin?
You're talking about for Florida?
Florida and or Auburn, as much or as little as you want to add.
Perfect. Yeah, so for Florida, I kind of, just from glancing at them, they had some big wins in their non-conference slate, but so far in the SEC, there hasn't been a single gimme game for them. There hasn't been any sweeps or anything like that. They've lost 2 5-set matches already, and I like Missouri's defense holding up against Florida. They lost Kennedy Martin to Penn State, and she just crushed them last season. They've been having trouble replacing that production. Auburn's been a little harder to judge because they haven't played those top-end teams in the SEC, and their only loss in conference play was to Florida. They've got phenomenal defense, holding teams to 157 hitting while hitting 275 on offense. And then their middle is just fantastic. That's why the defense is so good. I think Mizzou's attackers are going to have some struggles hitting around them, hitting over them. And Auburn, of the two, seems like the tougher match.
Florida entering this season was one of the most difficult teams to get a gauge on, one of the most enigmatic teams in the country. You have a new head coach coming in, Ryan Tice. Mary Wise, legendary head coach, was at Florida for decades, was almost the entire history of that program. So much of that program was tied into its head coach, and it is incredibly difficult to move on from that. Ryan Tice, no doubt a talented head coach. Question is, how can he adjust to the SEC? He's been coaching various schools up north, was at Ohio, most recently had a lot of success at Marquette. The reason that Florida was so difficult to get a gauge on, they had very good middles, great setter, very good libero. All those components of their team are Sweet 16 worthy, which is where the Gators were last year. The question was, can your hitters step up? Because they didn't have really any proven production outside of, I believe, Anaya Madkin at that position, and Madkin was a transfer from Arkansas. So the question, can your hitters step up? Because if they can, it's a Sweet 16 team. And the answer has been, outside of the opening weekend for the Gators, a resounding no. For as much as Mizzou has struggled and stumbled at times out of the gate in this season, Florida's issues have been significantly worse. And they look like a team that is really, really struggling right now. I talked about the similarities between the Oklahoma match and the A&M match from last year. The Oklahoma match for Mizzou they have to have a similar response. Now, after that A&M match, you went on the road, you lost to Kentucky. That's not too shocking. The Tigers haven't beat the Wildcats in a very long time. After that, you had the incredible run that set up the rest of that season. You beat SEMO, Alabama, Tennessee, Mississippi State, Arkansas, Oklahoma, Texas, Georgia, and South Carolina. All of those teams in a row. That is the run that led to the postseason success that we saw last year, Mizzou getting back to the Sweet 16. To me, there are 3 defining matches for the rest of this season that are going to tell us what this Mizzou team is going to do. Can they be the team that we thought entering the year. One of those matches is at Tennessee. The other two are this week, Florida and Auburn on the road. If Mizzou goes 2-0, you're talking about a team that can start to bounce back, that will begin to rise back up the rankings. If they lose both, you're looking at a team that is going to significantly have expectations changed and lowered from where they were a month ago.
Yeah, when you look at this weekend, you talked about some of that unproven production, specifically from Florida. Their top kills getter is Jordan Bird, who is a transfer from Texas, didn't play any time there. So this is her first real season, and she's doing it at the highest level. Leads the team in kills, but also leads it in errors. She's routinely hitting around or below 200. And so this Mizzou team, this Florida team is very high air. And so if Mizzou can force them into some of their worst tendencies, I think they have a shot. Looking at Auburn, again, not a great team last year. This year have been a lot better. They lost to Florida, but have taken down and swept Alabama, Mississippi State, and Ole Miss, which aren't the greatest teams, but it's not easy to sweep, especially a team like Mississippi State that does have some big wins here and there. So a lot of that strength for Auburn is coming from its block. They are tremendous at the net. They've outblocked their opponents 158.5 to 79 this year. In SEC play, that difference is 38 to 23. So at the net, they are taking advantage. So what Mizzou was struggling with is they were always going to Kalen Alexander in that last game against Oklahoma. If they do that again against Auburn, they're not going to find success. So again, it's all about staying in system, how to use your right side, how to use the slide, how to use the back row to your advantage to avoid that Tiger block, the Auburn Tiger block. Now, like Matthew touched on, expectations for this team can kind of shift. Mizzou is no stranger to struggling in the early season under Sullivan. They started 2-4. In SEC play 2 years ago. They started 1-2 last year, now at 1-3. Seeing what you've seen from the team, we'll start with you, Colin. Are you worried at all, or do you think they're still on track and there's still plenty of time for this team to bounce back, or do you think there are any major concerns?
Just to cite something that Matthew already touched on, it's that stretch last year after losing to A&M in the reverse sweep, and then going on that big run of wins that carried them to the postseason, that still gives me hope for this season. Yes, it's a rough spot to climb out of, but there's still so much time left in the season that I think you still haven't seen the best of this team, obviously. The biggest area of concern for me is just the lack of consistency from the attackers. Kaylin is clearly capable of carrying the offense on certain nights, but she's not always at that tier. And I feel like Janet is starting to return to form, and the middles have been great, but you don't have that rotational attacker like you had last year. You need someone like a Kamani Johnson or a Makala Baglio to step up as that rotational piece for this team to be legit, in my opinion.
And to touch on that point, I think you've seen Makala Baglio start to establish herself as that every game right side hitter. Now, the offense is obviously a work in progress. The efficiency is starting to get there. She's been fairly efficient during these last couple of matches. Obviously, we haven't seen the volume. They're really trying to set her up for success, make sure that they're not targeting her if it's going to be a low percentage opportunity. And I think that makes sense. As a true freshman starting in the SEC, it's not an easy thing to do. So I think that they're trying to develop her as the year goes on and really get her to be a more consistent and reliable offensive option later on in the season. And I think that you've got some hope there because the strength of this coaching staff, no doubt, has been development. You've seen it personally and as a team year after year. The Tigers are better at the end of the year and noticeably better than they were at the beginning. And that's exactly why I think you don't hit the panic button quite yet, is because of the development we've seen from this team over the past 2 seasons during the regular season. If it happens again, the Tigers will look significantly better than they do right now. But again, I think that this is going to be a crucial week for them, And if you continue to see the same issues, then I think you have to seriously reevaluate this team after the next week. Do I think that we're going to have that conversation? I don't. I think that they're going to win at least one of those matches, if not both of them. And I think that the odds that Mizzou wins both of those matches is much higher than the odds that they lose both of them.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to look at for this team, like you mentioned. Let's start with the fact that they have had one of the hardest SEC schedules to open. I mean, A&M and Texas on the road is quite literally the toughest you can get outside of Kentucky. Kentucky's their own monster, their own beast, but having to go on the road to both of those teams in that Texas pairing back-to-back, neither of those were destined to be wins for Mizzou. And it's okay to lose both those matches. You come home and they, like we said, dismantled Arkansas. They took care of business in that match. Then you're 1-2. Oklahoma's a tough one, but like you said, these sort of matches happen. You're not going to play 100% for every single match, for every single moment. And they got caught lacking, for lack of a better word. Now you head into 2 road games, which I would say are winnable on both fronts. Maybe not gimmies, maybe not even favorites, but both games that on paper Mizzou has the opportunity to win and a pretty solid chance to. Like somewhere, again, that 30 to 60 range that they win one or both of them. So, like Matthew said, I don't think it's time to hit the panic button just yet. Plus, after this, they've got 4 straight home matches against teams who are near the bottom or near the middle of the SEC that will help favor them. And if you're looking to go on a run, it either starts here or it starts next week. But I think if you lose both of the matches this week to Auburn, to Florida, and you're 1-5 in the conference, that's almost too big of a hole to get yourselves out of. So like Matthew said, you need at least one of these matches, but if you get both, you are jumpstarting yourself into a run, hopefully for the rest of October. For my last question, Colin, what is the biggest improvement you would like to see in this team moving forward if they hope to, again, reach that Sweet 16 or further this year?
Yeah, I have 2 things that kind of coincide with each other that Mizzou needs to improve on for this season to go the way we want it to, and that's cleaning up errors and stopping runs before they happen. I think the receiving needs to improve a lot, and that will in turn stop those runs from sprouting out and going to just longer runs. And I think the season is far from over, and Sullivan's still confident in this group, so I am too, frankly.
And then same question to you as well, Matthew.
So I think blocking is definitely one of those points. I would probably say, rather, you said receiving. I gave away my number 2, so I'll just start with number 2 is blocking. The blocking has been notably improved, needs to get better, right? You're going to need to see a deflection on essentially every swing. You don't necessarily need to get a block every single time, but you need to take a little bit of that velocity off of the ball, make life easier for your back row defenders. On the other side, receiving and specifically serve receive, right? That is going to be the key for this offense. I think that it's been one of the biggest issues with the offense has been the serve receive, in addition to the inconsistency that we've talked about. So if you combine a strong serve receive with better blocking, that is what will allow this team to significantly improve over this next month.
To round it out, from what I'm looking at, I think there's a lot of things that Mizzou isn't doing horrible. Again, I think these are all just things that they can clean up. And I think another thing they can clean up is just the depth and variety in their offense. It's wonderful that Kaylin Alexander is kind of firing on all cylinders once again with the talent that she provides. But there's so much more talent on this team, and you need to keep other teams honest. Like this Oklahoma match, when you go to Alexander over and over and over again, it's predictable, it's easy to block, and that's when Mizzou gets in trouble. So they need to, first of all, serve, receive, stay in system, and after that, they need to help find players like Janet Demaray, Maka Labaglio, the middles, Ariel and Haith, who can take advantage of said opportunities. So I don't think there's any reason to hit the panic button at all. This is a team that can easily bounce back and tune a couple things up and put themselves back in contention to be a top 4 team in the SEC, potentially host if they can go on a long enough run, and again, make that deep run in the SEC. What we didn't talk about at all, which was great again, was the service. The serving of this team is still great. They kind of struggled a little bit towards the tail end of Oklahoma, but still having people like Ariel Alexander, ZML, Maya Sands, who can get those, or Marina Kraunover as well, who can get aces anytime they want, is still a huge advantage. Thank you all so much for listening to Over the Net. It was wonderful to be back. We will have another episode coming out within the next couple weeks, hopefully also with Terrence Steger. Support your Olympic sports and go Mizzou Volleyball.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to Rock M Radio, a proud partner of Fans First Sports Network. Rock M Radio is the official podcast network of Rock M Plus, a new and exciting subscription service provided by me and the other voices of Rock M Radio. Please take a few moments to head over to rockm.plus and sign up for an account today. The cost is only $5 a month, and benefits include access to our live podcast, a subscriber-only message board, weekly newsletters, and more. If you enjoyed this episode of Rock M Radio and would like to see more just like it beamed directly into your personal device, make sure to click the subscribe button below and tell your friends. Our podcast feed is available through the Apple Podcast app for iPhone, Google Podcasts app for Android, whatever app you listen to your podcast. You can also find Rock M Radio on Spotify. If you're looking for a podcast about your favorite team that is not Missouri Tigers, Fan First Sports Network is your answer. A full podcast network loaded with the team-specific podcasts covering Major League Baseball, the NFL, NHL, NBA, MLS, and more. And we'll be back with more episodes of Rock M Radio coming to you soon.